Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everyone. I am Steve,
And I'm Jeff.
and we are on the Caemlyn Road with this scary looking gentleman on the front.
Right? Right. We
We
were
we
talking
talked
about.
about this at the end last week, but I still don't know who this gentleman is
Oh,
because he's not a
fair enough.
fade. There's a whole bunch of fades. There's like
Yeah,
multiple
yeah.
fades. There's a whole bunch of
This,
Trollocs,
this dude has
including including my favorite description of a Trolloc yet
I
in
think
the
I'm
whole
gonna
thing.
guess. I think I'm gonna guess. But yeah, no, this skull has eyes, so it can't be a fade, right?
Right.
Um, I'm gonna go ahead and say no. I do think it is a Trolloc.
Do their skulls just not have eye holes at all?
Oh, for fades, I would
Yeah.
assume no, because it's just like flat, right, like an egg. But to me, this looks like a Trolloc skull, in that it's
Yeah.
like a big, wider, to have a like slightly beast aspect. It's got some horns going on, right? But I do also get that it's not super obvious. It does just sort of seem like devilish, especially with a pitchfork, right? But the fist, like a fist of Trollocs, I don't know.
Hmm.
For some, this speaks Trolloc to me.
Right. The horns make you think he
Mhm.
beast.
Right,
It's a he
right.
beast. That's another
Exactly.
name we should have for fades. We should call them eggheads. That's my new name for
And
them.
so it shall be.
And there's so much egg imagery already happening in
I
this
was saying,
one.
you already like the egg, so are you used to it? And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
we're on the mid train.
I'm past egg now.
Yep.
Unless something changes my mind otherwise. But this chapter, is pretty exciting. This felt like a Mad Max movie, like a big
Right?
chase movie going on here in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I dug it.
Yeah, I know with the last one we were kind of like, what's up with this fade? But I feel like this chapter delivers on like this the fear, the
Mm,
chase, all that.
yeah.
But love to hear your reactions first, of course.
Uh, yeah, no, and like when the chase like went on, I was not expecting that at one point they're like, well, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna charge right at these bastards. I was not
Yep.
expecting that. I was like, oh, okay. We're doing this. All right, let's do this.
Yeah, no, I definitely wasn't either because I can't remember the little intricacies of these moments. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because they're important, right? They're being chased, they're fighting. But there's a lot of battles, as you might imagine, over the course of this series. So yeah, I was like, what do they do next? I don't remember. But yeah, it's fun that they're boxed in, then they're going north, and they got to like break through. For sure, for sure.
So, well, we start off before like we start hearing these horns behind us
Mhm,
and all this.
mhm.
I like how we start off with like Nynaeve. What's she trying to do here? She's trying to like either A, like make peace with
Right.
Moiraine, or B, kind of show her up. I feel like she's kind of being
Mhm.
like, look, I can do wizardy things too. Look at my herbs. Ooh, bet you never thought of this. Herbs.
I enjoy this interpretation. Yeah, I mean, there definitely is language in here to support that. Where we've got, Rand noticing that she seems pleased, right? Or whatever, when Moraine finally agrees to take something after Moraine's like used up a lot of energy. So yeah, it does create a nice little question because I mean, it's definitely hit multiple times when Rand's like, what is she up to? I don't even care. But she's definitely up to something, so it's
Hmm.
it's it's threaded for sure.
So, yeah. So I thought that was pretty funny. Oh, this is the
Mhm.
first time we hear this name for Lan, the last lord of the Seven Towers. So,
Yeah,
so we,
good.
we don't really know like anything about that, but I did highlight here. You see, the Gleeman seem to know a great many things. Shady.
Shane, I'm waiting for the part where you highlight that Tom was chewing on his beard or his mustache.
he,
That's
he,
true.
there's a lot of mustache work in this chapter. I noticed he was like blowing out his mustaches. I'm like,
But
okay.
it's chewing on them. How do you be chewing on them? That's amazing.
Yeah, it's gross.
Um, yeah, with the Seven Towers thing, it's tricky because obviously a lot of information has been dropped. So it's kind of the feeling of like, have I read that? I don't think I've read that. But then it's, how can I put this? It then comes up, he screams it, right? Later when he's charging. So it sort of feels like something that I can't tell if it's come up in the moment, but then didn't get threaded earlier, or it does feel a little personally coincidental that she calls him that, and then right after he's screaming that, so we know what he's like, why
Right,
he's saying.
right, right.
It does feel like this is something we would have heard a couple chapters ago, but maybe it's the idea that there's so much we're hearing, we need to hear things a little bit more back to back so we can remember what the heck it's about. Even
That's true.
2 chapters ago, would we remember? Maybe.
I was just thinking about that, like when they all like yell out for Metherine or whatever, and I was like, oh yeah, who's that guy? Who was that?
Right?
What was that story that we got?
Mm-hmm.
And it will lead me to my next prediction. I'm sure you'll be happy that I got. I need to like put up some sort of like board or something in my room that keeps track of all my predictions so that I can check them off one by one as they all come true.
Because obviously.
Obviously. I also like this line from Nynaeve, which actually didn't quite completely understand, because she was like, he was not seen.
Oh, yeah.
I have
was
followed
reading
his
that.
trail, remember? And I'm like, wait, wouldn't that be indication that he could very well have been seen if
I
you
was
could follow his trail?
waiting for you to bring up this line. I was like, crap. There it is.
She's
Yeah,
just so cocky is what that's showing here. She's like,
exactly.
only I, daughter of so-and-so, the best tracker in all of Two Rivers, could have seen
Yeah,
him.
that one I still want to see it a little bit more. But yeah, no, I think what this is doing, I say crap in a fun way, like it's not bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I think it points more to her character, right? Like this is a perfect example of an unreliable character, that the fact she's saying this doesn't really make any sense. She just wants to feel good about that, that she's the only one that could track him. That like, no, I did it, but no one else could, and that's what makes me doing it amazing. Thank you.
Team Dark One. Hashtag Team Dark One.
Obviously, right? She's trying to poison Moiraine with her herbs, right?
Yes.
Like, really.
Moiraine, you better check these herbs.
What you doing?
I do like it too, because Nynaeve's like, ooh, check out my herbs. And then it
Right.
does actually come into play later, right? Because like Moraine's all worn out. And she's like, well, we got these herbs that you can use. But like Nynaeve's trying to make a big deal about her herbs. Meanwhile, Moiraine causes wall of fire and
Right.
massive earthquake and like all sorts. She goes like all out on this one.
She does. I was not expecting her to go that big on it. She went big.
Yeah, because her other things have seemed like really constrained and minor. You know, like making fog.
Right.
I guess like a whirlpool is kind of a big deal, but it still seems kind of like dinky, and then like just this big illusion. But in this one, she's like, literally, I'm just gonna burn you all to death and swallow you up in an earthquake. And you're like, oh, all right. That's the power level we're talking about here.
I was like, I see you, Moiraine. I see you.
We're talking like power gem level of power. So that was exciting.
I thought that was fun to get that. And I feel like it's been a nice build, right? Because we have seen her do these smaller things that have been useful at the time. But now we're in a place where no one's around, right? Whereas previously, I mean, sure, when they were running, like no one was really around the fog and they were just trying to hide, right? But, with the whirlpool, there were people there. And then with the, obviously we talked about was creating a massive version of herself, the best way to get away on it, without being seen. But now the only thing that's around are Trollocs and Fades. So she can like just get crazy, it feels like, which is, I don't know. I think that adds to the sort of weight of this scene that, that there are suddenly all these Trollocs, that they do charge the Trollocs, that there is this massive use of power. It's like, whoa, wow. I don't know. I wasn't ready for this, and it was cool.
Yeah. I liked it. So let's talk about this charge here, which leads into my prediction. So,
I was waiting because you didn't say your prediction yet.
I know. So here it comes. So Lan charges down, It says for the Seven Towers, this thing we just learned about, that he's the last lord of. Rand, surprised to find the heron sword in his hand. Yeah, we know, like, you're, like, the embodiment of this old dude, and you know perfectly well how to use this sword. And then he cries, Manathrine. Am I saying that right? I probably should have looked at the glossary.
Let me check the key. Yeah, I
Yeah,
would say it is like Manetheren in my head.
Manetheren. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
better. Manetheren. And Perrin. So that's like, now that they've just been told that that's like really what their homeland was called way back in the
Right.
day. They actually didn't know that until Moiraine told that whole big story, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, and then Matt shouts something that looks like Italian. All of a sudden, like, I looked at this and I was like, oh. He's like suddenly turned Italian all of a sudden. And he shouts this, and you're like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
you're like, huh? So, and then we get the description, and I've actually forgotten. Like, Moiraine straight up tells us what this means. Maybe I should go and find that because I have it highlighted. I can't remember exactly.
Moiraine is awesome, as always.
As always, it was probably also in the glossary. I probably should have just looked it up.
No, it is not.
What people say when they're high out of their minds. Where? I wonder where that is. Oh, I might not have highlighted.
I was going to say Manetheren is Menetheren, so the emphasis is on the F part.
Manetheren.
Yeah, Manetheren.
All right. So, dang, I didn't highlight where she says what that means.
It's for the glory of the rose. I want to say the sun
Right.
and the
She
rose.
talks about she also talks about the
Yeah.
eagle thing, which was the thing
Yeah,
that.
the red eagle.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, she actually says the line again. So yeah, you just found it.
Yeah.
Because it's already italicized.
For the honor of the red eagle, which, if I remember correctly, which I don't think I do, but is this like some kind of what Min saw for Matt? Or was it a gem? Was it a red gem or something?
She saw a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah,
But this is one of those fun moments, Steve, where instead of continuing to read, we flip back and we see what did Min say.
All right, let's go back to Min. Wait, can you go back? I feel like it's going to be a pain in the butt for me to go back.
No, I'm going back. I'm looking. Where, I mean, obviously, yeah, we'll see if I can find it by the end.
It was right at the beginning of that first city chapter, because the Min part was right at the beginning of that.
Yeah, but then she sees him again. But I'm trying to remember when.
Strangers and Friends. It was at Strangers and Friends. I'm pretty positive.
Oh yeah, all right. Well,
yeah,
Strangers.
Because then Wisdom is the next chapter, because they get back to the thing and they're like, oh,
right. Because she says about each of his friends, and then she says about him last.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So writing is their first thing. Okay, what do we got going? I think I'm almost there.
Oh yeah, he's gotta like get through all this.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, a red eagle, and the other one a red eagle, an eye on the balance, dagger with a ruby, a horn, and a laughing face. So good job.
All right, so my old man faulty memory was right about the red eagle thing that she saw around him. Okay, so this leads to my theory that they are all re-embodied somebody or others. And I think Matt is the re-embodied of the dude that Moiraine was actually telling the story about.
Oh, right, because Moiraine talks about the rose and talks about the guy, right?
Yeah, she talks about that guy in that part. And then I'm and so why would he have just like spurted this out without even really like knowing that phrase? The rose of the sun, the ancient war cry of its last king, and then Eldraine was the rose. This is the chick who had all the super magical power that she should have used a lot earlier, but dawdled a little bit and paid the price for it. So my thinking now is that all three of them are reincarnated of different people. I still think Rand is our reincarnated Luz, but now I think Matt is our reincarnated this guy. Wait, what was his name? She says Eldraine, but that was the
Yeah, she
wife.
says it was Drain, but yeah, you're right. That was someone else. So I don't think we get the name here.
Right.
But so I have a question for you. So do you like that idea?
Yeah, it's fine. I just want to
Cool.
see if I guess you do like, okay, am I excited to find out if I'm right or not? I mean, kinda. Yeah, I guess I'm excited
Well,
to find out if I'm right.
I mean more, do you like the idea that there could be more than one chosen one, or that there could be more reincarnations happening?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I like that idea. Yeah, I like it all right. Do I find it like super compelling? It's not like a character. It's not like a character problem. It's not like a,
Mhm.
like a dilemma that I know about. Yeah, it's just like literally just a thing. Like, okay,
Right,
they could all be
right.
reincarnated. Is that a cool, quote unquote, cool idea? I guess. It's a cool idea. But I'm
I'll
not
take
like
it.
super invested
I'll
in
take it.
that
I'll
right
take
now.
the kind of cool
You'll
idea.
take kind of cool. Okay, cool. So I don't know who Perrin's supposed to be. I don't know. We'll need to get another story. Oh, maybe who Tom was talking about. Tom was talking about then some other a hunter dude in his story in the
Could
inn
be.
last chapter,
Could
if
be.
you remember. And maybe that's who Perrin is. But I think they're all just different people, but I think Rand is lose, which makes
All right.
Rand
All
still
right.
the most important.
I was going to say, I feel like this is the, at least recently, the biggest the book has done to say it might be someone else, right?
Right,
Especially
right, right, right.
with
Because he has
Rand
that
going
thought
like,
again,
yeah,
that oh, since because Rand actually thinks that, right? Like, oh, because Matt
yeah,
says this, maybe he's the
right.
one. That smells like red herring to me, though. If Matt was a descendant of the ancient kings of Methrin, and then maybe the Chalks were really after him. I mean, even the fact that Jordan put this line in his head makes me say, like, nah, nah.
No problem.
Wishful
No
thinking,
doubt.
Rand. Wishful thinking.
Right.
You know it's you, bro. You had the sword in your hands.
Cool. Yeah, but I personally, I like that we get a little bit of a mix in there. I know we talked before about, how compelling is the mystery of Rand,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like just tell us so then we can move on with our lives, right? And we talked about how maybe that's maybe one of the reasons why people feel like the book kind of hits its own stride, or the series hits its own stride in like book two or three.
Mm.
But I do think more of this makes that mystery a little more interesting, where we are learning a little bit about other possibilities as opposed to it just seeming like it's Rand from
Mm.
that, because like we're in his viewpoint and everything. Again, I totally hear you that we are still in his viewpoint. It does seem just like wishful thinking, but I'll put a little more back and forth than that. I think justifies keeping the mystery, or at least having it. Um,
Sure.
so my take.
But I mean, again, if you're not like a fantasy fan, that's, I guess, like, I don't know. I say stuff like this and I think, like, it blows people's minds, but that's all just plot, right? Like, it's,
Oh,
and
sure.
I know, like, it's almost tiresome, like, the debate between plot versus character. Like, it feels like a dumb false dichotomy about, like, what you're focusing on. But
Sure.
like when it's just like the mechanics of who's the reincarnation of whom, that just feels like Jeopardy trivia to me. It just feels like, oh, yeah, who's going to be what? I don't know what is compelling about that. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, no, I hear you. It's more how the characters are going to react to that waiting that I think makes it interesting.
Right,
Like
yeah.
this moment of Rand being hopeful that it would be someone else and that it could be, that is the interesting part, right? So
Mm,
it's like the plot effect on character, right? And that's why I think in some of the other parts it hasn't been as interesting, because it hasn't. It's just been like, oh, it seems like it's got to be him by default, and it's not like, what are we going to do chapter upon chapter of him like wishing it wasn't or something. So to me, it's like these little moments where we get the plot and the character kind of both hitting
mm.
are the fun ones to me.
All right, all
And
right.
it's a tiny thing, obviously, right? It's a very brief moment, but that to me gives it just a little bit more legs than it had previously. Is all I'm saying.
Cool. I like this. So a few lines on here. This was my favorite.
There it is. Yep, I knew it.
Beast muzzled almost men. Almost
I
men
need to
is
make
my
a board.
favorite.
I need to make a board of predictions of all the lines that I think you're going to
You
bring
should. You should do that.
up.
That's what, and I thought that was also fun coming off this, which just felt like the most fantasy
Yes.
sentence that you
Oh,
could
yes.
have. Because honestly, this whole from the forges of the
Mhm.
Kandar,
Oh, yes.
it's like, it. What does that sound like to me? It sounds like I have the power, but
Oh,
it just
absolutely.
seems like a
He-Man.
very He-Man
Yeah.
like type word.
Okay.
But like I was like looking
Um,
at the sentence and I was like the sentence would work really well. The warder's blade met black steel with a
right,
clang like a great bell. And
right.
honestly, that's what I would write. This whole from the forge that seems like an extra pointless fact at this
You see,
point in the
when you go to
sentence.
school for fantasy writing, you're indoctrinated into needing to do this. I was going to say, I think this is a cheat, right? Because I don't think that's the way Rand sees it, right? I don't
Right,
think Rand
right.
in the moment
He wouldn't
that this
know that, right?
words from Pakandar, right? Well, I mean, they mentioned it at some point
Oh,
earlier,
okay.
and I do think this is also very much this is like straight up an Aragorn line in
Yeah.
like in the Lord of the Rings where Frodo's stabbed and like it's because it's from forged in this thing. It's like poisonous, right, and everything. So I feel like we're getting the same sort of feel, right? Um, but yeah, this is definitely slipping into like someone like Tom telling us this story.
Exactly. That's so funny. This is like one of the few times where like the language of the actual book
Yeah,
matches that high chant or
yeah.
whatever it is of the
Yeah, book
thing,
movie high chant, bro.
which usually it doesn't. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Except for the prologue. No, I'm joking. I mean, that's not really even that, but that one's just so chock full of like world terms.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is definitely one of those moments. And again, if it was different characters viewpoint, I could see that little addition making sense. But yeah,
Hmm.
it totally feels like I think he was just trying to add some gravitas to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, he wants that fantasy sound. It was like I was like, this is the most fantasy sentence I think I've read from the actual narration. I guess I should say,
It speaks
in
to
the
my
whole
spirit.
thing.
What can I say? What can I
All right, so everybody fights their way through this
say? Hmm.
surprisingly well. I mean, like nobody even gets injured in this. I mean, there's like a bit of a melee here before Moiraine
Yeah.
decides to like break out the huge magic. Oh,
Hmm.
this also felt very much like that last Mad Max movie too, like these hooks that
Oh,
they're
right. Yeah.
like bopping
Yeah.
down to try and grab them
Hmm.
off the horse or whatever, and they just about get who do they get? Just about get Perrin.
They just about get Rand because he gets yanked up, but then Matt is actually on. So I think he's the closest to getting got, as
Ah,
it were.
gotcha,
Um,
gotcha. Yeah, and that makes sense. Like they're you were just trying to capture him.
yeah,
Um,
that's exactly what I was going
so
to
we
say.
got these
That
little loops that we're gonna
right.
do it.
I feel like they set that up though, because when they see the Trollocs, they see the hoop things and
Yeah.
the hooks, right? So it's not so much a fight as it was. Well, they're fighting, right? Well, the Trollocs are just trying to capture them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that sells a little bit, why people aren't wounded or something, because otherwise, yeah, I would expect someone to die or to lose a leg if the Trollocs were like, if they ran into a wall of Trollocs at this stage of preparation.
Yeah. All right. Wait. So how does she take out the ones that are around them?
Uh,
Because so this seemed like one of these weird moments, like how they get out of plots in movies, like Independence Day.
yep,
They're like, we killed the main alien,
yep,
and that made all the aliens instantly die. And like they
yep,
just pull one of these where Lan has hacked the head
yep.
off of the main my draw, and that makes all the Trollocs like fall to the ground.
I'm disappointed this line was not highlighted as I expected it to come.
Well, I guess I don't know why I didn't highlight it, but I was like, what? Really? This makes all the Trollocs die too?
Yeah, I can't remember if earlier
That's
in
your
the book.
like get out of your impossible plot free card that writers like
Right.
to like throw out there. It's like, oh yeah, it's a hive mind. Didn't you know?
Completely.
It's a hive
It's
mind.
a big trope, for sure. For sure. Of like wait a second, this doesn't seem like a good system to have a hive mind.
Right,
Or not,
right.
true. Um,
This is why
the other thing,
centralization never works.
I'm trying to remember though, if earlier in the book we did learn about like Trollocs' connections to Mirdraw, because
Hmm.
could justify this moment some. But the fact we don't remember, I mean, obviously we are reading, a chapter a week or whatever, so it's stretched, especially with a book this long. But not getting it anytime soon, it does just sort of feel right.
Yeah. So like I like that it won't that the head will just be there alive, I guess. It won't die until nightfall.
I feel like that's what sells it. It's great that you just brought that up because it's like we hit this thing and we're like, really? And then it's like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. It
I also like
doesn't
he's
die.
like, that's what I've heard anyway. That's what I've just heard. Whatever, Tom, you know more than you're letting on, and we all know it.
Right, right. I think this is what Jordan does though. He'll use like a little bit of a trope like, oh, magic is just these four elements, but then he'll do something cool. Or like we'll use the trope like it's hive mind.
Mm,
But it's a hive mind guy who doesn't die.
right, right.
From the game. It's like, oh, that's good. That's kind of neat. So, I feel like that's how he is the writer gets out of these situations.
Distract you with something else. Cool.
Yeah,
You'll forget how
totally.
we got out of
Totally
that plot point.
yeah, like, oh, you heard this before? You haven't heard this one, right? So I think that's what he's doing.
All right. So she makes this whole earthquake, and these walls of fire happen. Um,
Sure.
and then
And then
so we get, which you had kind of prepped me for, but I don't think I would have known it
let me hear fire.
beforehand if you hadn't said. So it's not my strongest with working with these things.
Right.
And that's why she's wiped out. Though that said, these two were way more impressive than anything else she did. Like, if this is not her main wheelhouse,
Right? Does
I
that just
don't
make
get
her
it
people more
because
awesome?
this was so much better than the air nonsense that she was doing before.
I don't know, then. She moves their sense. That's a big deal.
Oh yeah, and then Nynaeve's right there to like, oh let me help you out. Let me
Yep.
give you these. She gives them the herbs, and Moiraine
Mhm.
just downs it immediately.
Does.
All right, all right. I'm gonna turn a blind eye to the shadiness and not suspect that she just drug the heck out of Moiraine.
I was going to say, right? Poison.
But maybe she's helping her. Yeah, that might be helpful because Moraine seems a little bit more revived here after that. So then they go, okay, we're gonna go to this other place
Right.
that we didn't want to go to before, but we got to because there are like Trollocs everywhere.
Mhm.
And I guess this is bad news to go up in this place. And this also felt like, if you're into. I feel like this would be like the part where, Jeff, you would be really excited about going into this like big, what is it, like a castle that's just empty or like a walled
Mhm.
town that's like
Right.
completely empty. It's got a cool name to it. And I would say like this, I would imagine this like super
Oh, yeah.
rows your boat because like for
Okay.
me, like I didn't care anything about the city. The city was not very interesting to me, but I was like, oh, okay, yeah, what's this place about? What's this? This has kind of got a mystery. It's kind of got like some
Right.
threat to it because we didn't want to go there. It's all empty,
Mhm.
but like, of course, it's not going to be empty. This feels more like an exploration that I actually do have some interest in.
Cool. All right. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the name is so well chosen. We've talked before about like trying to find that right fantasy name or name for anything, in a book
Mhm.
that kind of embodies a feeling, right? And I feel like Shadar Logoth does a nice job of being ominous. Especially when she's like, it was called this, then it died. Now it's
Yeah.
called this. Um, But I think it's a power comparison thing, kind of almost like we were talking about with Moiraine to a small degree in terms of connection. Like we saw Moiraine like do crazy stuff with like Earth and Fire, and she's like, "Oh, I'm kind of weak at those." And we're like, "Girl, what can you do with the other things?"
Right.
Like, wild. But so here, we've seen the Trollocs. They seem pretty crazy. I mean, sure, they got the hive-mind weakness going on, right? But they seem pretty intense. And so the idea that they won't go to this place, like this place is worse in some ways than them,
Right.
but the group has to go there. I think that, at least to me, that's what creates a fun mystery of like, how could it be worse? What's it going to be? Because to me, it just, maybe it's a ghost thing, but would Trollocs care about ghosts? Would Fates care about ghosts? Like, it seems like it's got to be something pretty darn bad. Like, is there some
Spiders.
sleeping zombie dragon in this thing? Like, what's going on?
It's
Right?
always spiders. It's always
So,
spiders.
your Lord of the Rings training. Maybe. And we certainly get at the beginning of the next Shadows Waiting. So,
Yeah. Well, okay, so what I'll say here though, what's interesting about this, I think why like I'm interested in it is not really due to mystery, but due to implied threat, right? Like
right,
implied danger. It's more
completely.
suspense than
Yeah,
mystery.
yeah. Because it's like, to me, it's what's worse than Trollocs,
Right,
basically, is
right,
what I'm thinking. Like, what kind of crazy, tripped out creature or beast or something is going to
right,
be
right,
living here? Yeah.
right. It's got to simultaneously be worse than Trollocs, but
Mhm.
somehow better than Trollocs because we're going here to avoid Trollocs.
Right.
So we got to think we have better odds against whatever is in here. Um, but yeah, yeah. So all right, I think that's all I had to say about this one. Jeff, did you have any other
Um,
notes?
I just, it's so funny for you to say this because obviously I read the Struggle Test, but I was so pleasantly surprised by this chapter.
Hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm always like excited to just get to talk about a book I love. I mean, what's better than that? But then just going through it, I was like, oh. Like, it was just, so a lot of tense moments in it. And yeah, I enjoyed getting to see Moiraine go all out. And um, it's fun for us to get to talk about a chapter like this, I think, which does have more payoffs after some other chapters that are maybe a little slower. And I'm glad to see your interest in it. Like, obviously, as we've seen in some other parts, I've been like, yeah, no, I hear you. And even this, right, like with the hive-mind stuff, like, yeah, it's like a little cheat to get out of it and stuff. It's super tropish. But overall, I feel like the fun gets rolling with this and definitely makes, me eager as a reader to read about Shadow Logan and what's going to happen there.
Okay, I want to close on this also
Yeah.
pretty hilarious line. Your staff is very powerful. Like, that was like weirdly like kind of like coming onto her or something. Oh, ooh, your staff is
And there
very
was the
powerful.
Nynaeve based on that right away. Nynaeve's like this shunned lover, right?
Yeah, right. Nynaeve is pissed. So that's pretty
I mean,
funny.
if we go that route, obviously Egwene was supposed to train underneath Nynaeve, and now Egwene is training more
Hmm.
underneath, right? So like a stolen tutee or student,
Hmm.
if you will. Um, But for me, you want to know the parts that like I geek out about
Hmm.
is then Moraine's explanation that like things don't have power. It's got to come from a living mind. And then that just like spins me out. I'm like, well, living mind? So can like Trollocs do this? Do we have like Fades with power? They're like animals that can, use the one power. So like that's what, that sort of stuff is what sets
Oh,
me up.
that's sort of interesting. Like, I feel like I would just naturally assume that anybody with a brain would be able to learn the magic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Is that usually how in these books are? Like, or is it like you have to have some innate something inside you to use the
Oh,
magic?
Steve, you don't know what you're opening with
Is
this
this like,
question.
is this a can of worms?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it relatively short. But for someone who completely geeks out on magic systems, I would say that there's a couple different types of, core concepts in magic systems. What we're dealing with here is a sort of anyone, right? I mean, this story obviously has some chosen one aspects to it, right?
Yeah. And
And
she could
also,
just sense that
mhm,
egg
right,
had it,
right,
right? Like an egg's never trained on
mhm,
anything. So like it
exactly.
tends to I feel like it always gets kind of mixed up into people's attitudes of like innate talent, or also
Yes.
like in a belief that people have that like, oh,
Mhm.
you were just born playing the piano,
Exactly.
you know how to play the piano, which is like BS. That person spent a huge chunk of their childhood playing piano, and that's why they can play piano, but
There's no
like,
other kind of words, right? Because yeah, this leads into a whole thing that you and I care a lot about.
okay.
Teachers, right? And yeah, I do think the reason some people write certain magic systems the way they are is because of that. But I would say this one straddles the line to a degree that you've got people that are born with it, seemingly, but then they've got to train to use it, or they could die, or just stunt themselves. There is some hinting, and I obviously I don't want to be spoilery, but I feel like when Moiraine talked about it, there was something about that it can be learned, but definitely thus far, what we've gotten
Hmm.
is more of this idea that some people just have it, and then those who have it can train to use it,
Well,
right?
it's funny if is that optimal in a storytelling type situation, because I've
Mm.
heard this too, with Star Wars and the Force, and like people
Oh,
being especially like, oh, it's lame that like the
mm.
Force is just in the Skywalker family, and it's very like it feels very nepotistic sort of idea, which I always kind of just thought was like a nonsense criticism, because the reason it's like that is because of family gives you instant drama and gives you instant
Mm.
tension. The reason why it's important that this is all in the Skywalker clan is not because we want to make some point about aristocracy or something. It's because if it's his dad, that's a problem. Like, that's the best problem that Luke can have, is if the bad guy is his dad, right? So, like, that's why you do that. But I
Mm.
wonder, like, if in stories you do need to limit it so it like helps to go, oh, some people just kind of naturally got it. On the other
Right.
hand, they need to be bad at it first. There needs to be like a journey of them
Mhm.
getting better at it. So then they're learning it. So you have this whole kind of contradiction of like, oh, you naturally have it, but then you also need to get better at it at the same time.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So I think that is a relatively common system because of the reasons you just said, right? It lets you avoid magic just being everywhere because that's a lot to write, number
Mm-hmm.
one. But then two, it, still gives you that arc. You can still get the growth. Yeah. I would say that, obviously over time, people have played with this a lot, and there's a lot of variations on it. Um, but I do think it's interesting that in so many cases, uh, we're often seeing a world where there's not as much magic, or magic is tough to find.
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of the reasons I like Wheel of Time so much is because magic is so much more at the forefront
Right.
of the story. And stories have come out since it that have more magic than it, right? But if you think about some of the other big series like, George R. R. Martin, with Game of
Right.
Thrones, like there's some magic, but it's like dragons have mainly been killed. Like it's a big deal that she brings the dragons back. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Or we've got these people that can use the fire god's power sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like a lot of stories do that. One, because I think it can be tough to constantly be writing about power and stuff. I mean, that's my jam. But I think you're right. I think people make these decisions for writer reasons or belief reasons, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is relatively common. And I would, be more than happy to talk about this more at any time.
All right.
But I
Well,
said I would keep this short, so that's my short version.
yeah, we'll learn more about it, because I know we're kind of out of time for this episode, but I did mention in a previous one I wanted to talk to you more about systems, magic
Mm.
systems, because I was just sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, that whole idea of a magic system seems
Yeah.
really funny to me, because almost inherent in the idea of magic is you don't know how it works, right? I know I'm conflating then like illusions. It's an illusion, Michael.
Right.
But like I'm conflating those, but it almost seems like if you explain the magic, you lose the magic. If that makes sense.
And that is the whole argument people make for soft magic systems versus hard magic systems.
Gotcha. Whoa. So I'm just kind of self discovering all this stuff that people have talked
Yeah.
about and debated probably
Oh yeah,
on the
it's like a
internet
huge
for
thing.
decades. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is a massive thing as well.
Okay.
and I will happily go down that rabbit hole anytime.
All
So,
right, exciting. Well, we'll put a pin in that for a future episode. But next up, Shadows Waiting.
with weird, creepy bird things.
Bird things are back, baby. All right. See you next time.
See y'all later.